Thank you for joining us. My name is Anchor King. And I am Chanda-Masta. And we are with Row Media. We are a small nonprofit out of Washington State, but hopefully have a large impact, especially on Julian Assange's case and other cases around the world. And we're so blessed to be here in person with you, have a lovely dinner, and showing a movie in Ithaka. Welcome to Washington. How are you?
This is your first, you've been traveling around the country with this movie. What's the reception been like? I mean, do you think that Americans are, those who are already interested, the ones that are reaching out, or do you think that it's trickling out to everyday Americans who just don't understand or know it's only in the story?
This what it is nowadays. And those energies are washed at the shore, of course, the victim is there. There's another thing I'd just like to add, that there's a phenomenon which goes money, media, politics. And we're outside, so we're people, media.
Just add that we've showed the movie to people across the political spectrum, both left, right, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party members, and it's been very well received across all those of politics here in the US. And with the film, people can.
And it's not like going to, a street action or something like that. It's a much more softer ask for people to come out to a theatre, sit down with some popcorn, and watch a film for an hour and a half. So it's been really good in reaching people that might not have been shown anything about this subject before. Yeah.
You got anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we have very little democracy in a country that spreads its imperialism in the same name. But I think you've won the hearts of the people, and Julian's case and the freedom of liberties and free speech speaks to all of us in a way that nobody else has, I think, in my lifetime. Does he feel and know how much we are fighting for him out here?
Gosh.
I often wonder that. Did he get my letter? Does he know?
No, he gets it all right. And I think the last conversation we had, he brought up the number of letters that he'd received from people in Denver, because we'd just been to Denver. So wherever we go, like it'll be, I got all these letters from Tacoma,
Well, that's, I do a show and I tell everybody, I put the address to Belmar, Julian's address up every show I do. And I tell people, send him a postcard from wherever you're at, just, to brighten his day. So that is encouraging to hear that he is getting our messages, even though from what we saw in the movie, you guys haven't had a lot of access to Assange, especially under COVID. And we've seen him have medical crisis. And you guys, it sounds like, aren't getting very much information from the prison itself on his condition, other than what he tells you, right?
We get a 10-minute phone call, so I've got to cover a lot of ground. And usually we start off with the gossip about the kids and Stella and Julian, and Gabrielle and Severin. And then that covers 5 minutes. So you start to develop conversations about how are you? Well, he doesn't like to answer that, of course. Because he doesn't want to complain. And then the conversation is guillotined. It's quite short. But I'd like, just for your amusement, to add that in the part of the film towards the end, President Biden on his podium
Oh gosh,
at
that
the
was
inauguration
Yeah.
with nobody there except paid accolades, says American democracy. Well, last time I looked at the American Constitution, I understood that it was a republic.
It is.
yeah,
So I wonder which country he's, head of. Yeah. Well, which country he thinks he's head of.
So you've traveled a lot with this movie. I'm assuming not just in America. What is the temperature out there outside of these Western walls, to say? I mean, do people condemn America for doing this to Julian? Even Australia, we seem to see a lot of people not really know, Australians really knowing what's going on. What is the temperature out there?
Well, I think, when we show this movie, say we show it in Mexico, people react differently wherever we are. People in Mexico, they have a direct experience with persecution, and that it's a very family-orientated society, and so they get very emotional when they see this movie because they can relate to what's going on. Yeah, in Julian's case. In Australia, again, it's different. People connect in a different way. But I think it's not so much, people from the US are so hospitable, so friendly, and it's the government that the focus is on. It's Washington, D.C., the State Department, these sorts of organizations that are responsible for Julian's persecution. They are the targets of people's ire, if you will. But it's the support around the world is steadily growing. It just keeps growing and growing. It's like a tide, a sort of rising tide all around the world. Support for calling for Julian's freedom because of people understand how this affects them and how it affects their rights. Their rights to know what the governments are doing in their name, particularly as the US is, the hegemon of the world at the moment.
Right.
And so people really want to know what's going on, and they can see that what's happening to Julian stops them from understanding who their country are making alliances with and things like that.
So one of the things I'm always curious about, because Julian was even with the first round of WikiLeaks that came out, I was so proud that somebody was able to not only have the courage to publish them, but also to leak them in the first place, because it all confirmed, the atrocities we thought were happening, but we didn't have proof. And there was such integrity with the work he was doing. And I look at the pandemic and I think, man, it would be such a different story if Julian was free and able to help the whistleblowers now that are exposing some of the corruption. I think one of the things that I've seen as an activist on the ground is the changing tide amongst just regular people after the pandemic of realizing the value of their liberties and free speech. And did he warn you ahead of time of a lot of the surveillance state that we see kind of pushing technocracy that I think has really opened people's eyes to what can be and what has happened already?
Sure. He outlined in several directions the intrusion of the technocratic state into our lives and the capacity of contemporary technology to evaluate our wants, needs, and psychology, and as a consequence manipulate us in certain directions because of that. Of course, that was an important contribution for which his reward is 14 years of arbitrary detention. To the balance of your question, Julian spent, the last 4 years in maximum security prison, and that was during the COVID times. Gabriel and I traveled all of the European theatre, the UK, and the US during that time, and Australia, and found that the response of governments was completely synonymous with each other. Each government followed the other. And so we can only conclude from that, not conspiracy, but absolute panic, that they followed anything which would constrain the populations, because they really didn't understand what the COVID phenomenon was. In my humble opinion, COVID was, a little bit worse than influenza.
Yeah.
However, my view is it doesn't count. What does count is the state overreaction to the circumstance. We had one, if I could relate to you, a young woman, it's about 27, she was 8 months pregnant in Melbourne, wrote on her Facebook post that they were going to have a meeting about COVID and the resistance to some of the mandates. So the police came along and arrested her and strapped her arms behind her back with one of those plastic ties. So that principally what we're concerned with is the overreaction of government. And a truth teller like Julian and WikiLeaks would have been really handy in those circumstances.
I agree.
I agree too. We really could have used them. So the biggest thing that I took away from the movie that I didn't expect was the impact that it's having on the broader family, not just Julian. And I mean, it's the whole entire family. It's all Estella's family. It's the children. It's your children. As a father, I just got to feel that it's got to be so gut-wrenching to know that you have to leave a young child behind to go help an older child. I kind of feel like I picked that up from the movie. I felt your anguish for that.
Well, both Gabrielle has a 9-year-old daughter, and Severin, named Rosa, and I have a 7-year-old daughter, Severin. And you can say that they're not pleased with us. They want us to be home,
Right.
of course.
So that's got to be guilt, right? Do you carry guilt? Like I should be home, but I got to fight for my son.
You get the internal conflict is intense, yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think the corrosion of guilt would help. The corrosion of guilt won't allay Severin or Rosa's desire to be with their fathers. That won't. Me feeling bad won't help them. What will help them is going home.
Yeah.
And of course, Julian has 2 small children as well,
right.
That, a 4 and a 5-year-old who don't get to see him as much as they would like. I think they get about a visit a week to go and see him inside the prison. So, this is, it's this, our whole family is, a journalist. I spoke to a journalist who does a lot of work with prisoners in prisons, teaches them, Chris Hedges.
I love Chris.
Yes, he's
so great to sit down with.
And he said, my experience is that, when a loved one or when a family member is in prison, the whole family is in prison.
Yes.
I think you can look at Julian and Julian's family and, how we're all united and how we're all fighting for his freedom and supporting him while he's in prison to make it through this fight as sort of that we're all part of this, that we're all fighting for this together.
Over the last, since 1970s, it's 40 years. So that's 50 years now. The inference of states has changed, in particular in my own country, Australia. It was always thought that prison was, at time, for redemption and for retraining.
Reflection, right?
Yeah, and reflection and assisting to bring an antisocial person to a sociable person. However, it's changed now, and now it's considered first and foremost that you have to be punished, and the state has to extract retribution, and as a consequence, my laugh is ironic and grim. There's 2.25 million people in jails in the United States. Some of them are there for marijuana offences, and yet every state we go to, marijuana is legalised. It's pretty sort of.
The hypocrisy of that, yes.
It's pretty grim.
It is. We are absolutely a prison state nation that pretends
For
profit and pretends we're for democracy. I know I want to wrap it up because you guys have an early flight tomorrow, and I just thank you so much for your time.
Oh, I have one more after.
I'm curious. Are you still reading Voltaire?
I was on that.
Yeah, I still do. I read some the other day, which I shouldn't say, but yeah, I did find Voltaire very attractive, particularly as a youth. So they were making us. The school I went to, you had to go to church 15 times a week, and all my prayers were unanswered. So I thought it was a terribly impractical thing, and so I relied on Voltaire to guide me through those thickets of unreason.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's fantastic. So my last question is, what does extradition look like if it happens? Has the family thought that far ahead, or is that like, no, we'll cross that bridge when we get there? We're going to fight the battle that we're at now. And if it does come to America, what do you think about justice being served here in this country?
Well, we're fighting. Julian can't come here. And that's what we're focused on doing. We're focusing on stopping this where it is in the UK, and
Right.
Julian being released there. If he was to come here, there's no chance of a fair trial. No chance.
No.
He would be tried in the Eastern District of Virginia, what's now known as the Espionage Court, and they try Espionage Act. They try these cases in the Espionage Act court because they have 100% win
Success
rate.
rate, yeah,
Success
yeah.
rate. That's right. It's like similar to a court in Beijing. That's the sort of justice that Julian could expect if he's extradited here. And then you have the prison system on top of that, and what are all the people, all the sort of politicians who have actually called for Julian to be killed or called to him to be drone, as well as Mike Pompeo and his CIA operations, kidnapping, plots to assassinate Julian. That's what Julian has to look forward to if he's extradited.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, not running for president. We are very happy to hear that news yesterday.
Pompeo.
Yes.
Oh my
Pompeo
gosh.
is not
Pompeo running for president. Jeez.
Oh, I know. I mean, I think if he would have never even been in that position, we wouldn't be in Ukraine today. Honestly, it's quite stunning, the damage he's caused worldwide.
For sure.
I think Robert Kennedy put his hand up on the 19th,
He did.
announcing his
Yes.
presidential desire. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. I wish he would have run independent.
Me too.
I
Not
think-
happy that he's inside the Democratic Party. The whole reason I have been so driven to fight for Julian Assange is I was a Bernie delegate in 2016, and I saw inside the Democratic Party what was happening in real time, but nobody would listen to us. They just kept telling us, and then the WikiLeaks dropped, and it validated everything that we had been saying. But being inside the Democratic Party as long as I was in, I just don't have hope for anybody running inside that party, even a Kennedy, sadly.
Well, if they force Kennedy out of the Democratic Party, and the Kennedy family is, in essence, the Democratic Party, and in fundamental essence, American patriots,
Yeah.
they're looking at, being
more years of
very
Donald Trump.
unpopular.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That would be an absolute outrageous scandal for America to see them push Kennedy out of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thank you guys so much. I can't thank you enough for being out there, for doing this. I mean, I know I would do the same for my family, but you're fighting for something so much bigger, because this is the freedom of all of us to be able to, access information.
To know the truth.
To know the truth. So we thank you guys so much.
Thank you. It's been a real
Thank you.
pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Great cooking.
Yes, great cooking.
I can maybe have a picture of you all while you're here, David Light.
Sure.
Huh?
What's that?
Did we lose
Oh,
it?
but I'm-
Everybody left.
Did they leave?
Yeah, they all left. They all ran away. as soon as we
My
started.
phone real fast. Okay, hold on, let me get in.
Maybe
I'm
if you stand on the other side. This way.
Yeah, yeah. We're two in the middle. Come on.
Yeah, I think there's that.
We're just gonna go around in circles.
That's it, Bill. Well, why not just, you're all, then we get Julian and all the background. Like that.
Thank